Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. All right. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. Welcome to the May TEL Talk on mental health for families and employees with our guest speaker, Teya Dahle. Before we begin, we'd like to share a few pieces of information with you. TEL Talks, or Topics for Early Learning Leaders, are monthly webinars for early childhood program leaders to facilitate solutions-focused discussions for your questions about the early childhood field in Minnesota. These 1-hour webinars do not meet the standards for a formal professional development event, and participants will not receive a certificate of completion. TEL Talks are designed as a community building opportunity for leaders to engage and share ideas surrounding a specific content area. The TEL Talks team consists of Nikki Lepowski and myself. Nikki is the Quality Improvement Coordinator at Child Care Aware of Minnesota. I am the Workforce Advising Coordinator. Together, we work with Corey Woosley and Katie Hoffman at Child Care Aware to coordinate the TEL Talks. Some of our previous topics include courageous conversations, Minnesota policy, legislature, and getting ready for the census, and achieve memberships. Last month, we heard from a panel of guest speakers for our topic, Early Childhood Leaders. How are you coping? How can we help? If you are interested in listening to the recording of any of these webinars, please send me an email. Coming up in June, we will hear from Jenny Walker-Canute at the Deborah S. Fish Library in St. Paul with her topic, Resource Roundup, Libraries and Your Early Childhood Program During COVID-19. In July, we will welcome Ann Dillard to speak about the topic of Daring Greatly. What is Child Care Aware of Minnesota? We are a resource and referral network for early childhood education in the state. The map on the right side of this slide shows the Child Care Aware of Minnesota districts and regional offices. CCA helps families find a quality child care program. We support the professional growth of early childhood educators with professional development opportunities, eager to learn online training, grants, Parent Aware scholarships, and trainer and RBPD support. We keep the community informed on the importance of quality childcare. The TEL Talks team partners with several organizations to offer coordinated resources surrounding early care and education needs. As always, participants of these TEL Talks are able to utilize the chat function in GoToWebinar to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please feel free to share your questions on today's topic. Nikki and I can read the questions aloud during the broadcast. Now we'll go ahead and hand things over to our guest speaker, Teya Dahle. Teya is the Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Coordinator in the Behavioral Health Division at the Minnesota Department of Human Services. We are very excited for Teya to be with us today to share information on mental health consultation services. Welcome, Teya.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I really hope too that toward the second half of this presentation that it can be interactive. So I know that you have the option of raising your hand as well, and someone might be able to unmute you, or certainly feel free to put a question in the chat box or a comment. So I'm going to talk about the mental health consultation system within the state of Minnesota today. And as I was introduced to, I'm the coordinator of this mental health system. And also I'm a clinician too. So my area of practice is early childhood mental health. And before going to the state, my full-time job was engaging young families in mental health services and also providing mental health consultation, which I still do some of on the side as well. So I hope that some of my examples too can, inform what I'm going to be talking about today. So what is mental health consultation? It's a prevention service, and kind of the difference between other types of consultation and this type of consultation is that we're really looking at the adult's capacity to support young children in their social and emotional growth and development. So again, our hope is to support the adults who care for children, with the aim of preventing, identifying, and reducing mental health challenges in children 0 to 6. We use a combination of training, and the trainings that we have at this time are approved through the Achieve and Develop system and focus on a variety of topics. We also use reflective consultation, which includes active listening, exploring the care provider's attitudes and beliefs about the situation, and then some problem solving. And then we use some supportive skill building, and all to support child care providers, if you call yourself teachers, supervisors, directors, aides, anyone involved. So we wrote food service support and transportation staff, but really it's just anyone who's involved in the care of young children. There are different types of consultation within our services offered, and I would say it's a combination of these three things. So we look at program-focused consultation, and so that's thinking about what is the social and emotional health of your center or your family child care, thinking about the practices and policies that support children, the relationships between providers, the health and well-being too of the director. And then, we think about classroom-focused consultation. So in this instance, we'll think together with child care providers in specific classrooms, or if it's family child care, and what do the relationships look like within the classroom setting, and also what is the interaction between families and the child care provider. We think about the attitudes, beliefs, and practices and conditions that are supporting or maybe undermining the quality of relationships between the care providers and the children. And then sometimes we're asked to do some child-focused consultation. And so this is when we have a specific child whose behavior is challenging for adults, and we get special permission to involve the parents, and we think together with the teachers and parents about what it's like to be in relationship with this child, what might be promoting some of these maybe maladaptive behaviors, and what we might do to help. So we might help in developing an individualized plan. I will talk later about who our mental health consultants are, but they all are licensed mental health providers. And so what's different about this service than typical assessment is that we're looking at the relationship between the child and the child care. So we may give some sort of referral for a child to have specific treatment outside of this particular consultation. I will say too that Center for Inclusive Childcare too also provides child-focused services, or they may think about the infants within a child care. And again, this is very maybe child-specific. Whereas this consultation looks at, the combination of these three types of services. So thinking about the full program, the classroom, and then the child. So who can participate in our services and what do they look like? So again, right now we have this full mental health consultation program to parent-aware enrolled sites. And this is our longer term intervention. We hope to meet for about a year, and this might be a lesser amount of time if the consultation hours are used more swiftly. So if we're thinking family childcare, it's about 30 to 50 hours within that setting. And then it's 50 to 100 hours in a center-based childcare setting. So you could count on maybe 2 to 4 meetings per month per classroom. And the consultation is arranged with the director or the owner. So if we're thinking about a larger childcare site, it might also mean that we're targeting a couple of classrooms within that 50 to 100 hours. We have some sites too where the director is the one who prefers to get most of the consultation, and then the director is helping, the childcare providers, who they supervise. So again, the length of intervention is about a year. And we've had to shift to virtual meetings just because of the pandemic right now. But typically the meetings are in person, and if it's a remote location or an area that we're maybe we have fewer providers in, then we might be able to schedule virtual meetings, in the future. And some sites have already participated in that manner. And then the consultation and trainings are credited to the provider through the developed site. So all of our consultation providers are trainers and RBPD specialists, so you will get credit for this service. So then I want to make a distinction too. We have a newer service that we're providing just during this pandemic time, because we recognize that a lot of sites who are serving children who are essential workers may be, requiring support right now. So we were able to offer this brief service to any licensed childcare site. And I will say outside of Head Start, because Head Start has funding for mental health consultation already. Hopefully Head Start sites are getting consultation during this time, some support. So we limit it to 5 sessions, and these are virtual meetings. All of them are virtual. So you might be connected actually with a therapist who's located in a different part of the state. So when we think about just a visual of our current mental health system, we're thinking about, central to our system is children, and then we have, the caregivers and providers, and we think about the parents. And then around them, we have the RBPD specialists, who many of you interact with, and supervisors. And we think about our consultants as, supporting the entire system. I want to say too, before I get into, child stories, that I've been asked before, is this considered therapy? And I wanted to clarify that, all the providers, the mental health consultants, are licensed mental health professionals. And this is meant to not be traditional therapy, though it may feel therapeutic. So again, we might explore with providers maybe situations that have led up to the style in which they care for children. But we aren't necessarily going to kind of sit in the past experiences or the mental health functioning of the provider. We may provide referrals, and certainly we will be supportive and will think about those things. But again, it's not meant to be assessment or psychotherapy for the providers or the children. So Often people ask, what does it look like and feel like? So I've just provided just a couple of examples. Some of these too, I've changed up the details a little bit just so that they're confidential. But in one setting, there were several children. In this setting had multiple classrooms, but they had several children in multiple classrooms. And the children had really abrupt changes in their behavior. So much so that the teachers were thinking about making a child protection report because of possible abuse. So during this group mental health consultation, all of the individuals who were providing care for these kids got together and thought about the behavior of the children, thought about what might be happening. And what they found out is that this parent happened to be struggling in many ways to parent right now because of a recent divorce, and she had to be holding two and three jobs and just couldn't support her children in the same way. However, she didn't have time to tell this story to each provider. So by coming together during this consultation time, they were able to share their stories and then think together about what it might feel like to be these children right now, what it might feel like to be the parents right now, and what it feels like for them as care providers caring for these children during this time of stress. And then they were able to come up with a united way of interacting with the family that the parent then came back and talked about feeling very supported and held. And then there were improvements in the children's behavior. I also, this happens, frequently where maybe a child care provider, in this circumstance, it was a family child care provider, was about to ask a family to leave because of the child needing, constant redirection and attention. And the provider agreed to participate in mental health consultation. And we thought together about what does it feel like to care for this child. And she was really, honest in thinking about how draining it was sometimes because the child needed to be held in many different ways, even though he was a little bit older. I think he was about 3, that he couldn't engage on his own in play. And so we brought the family in too with their permission, and we thought about the child's skills, and it led to a Help Me Grow referral. And so we were thinking about the child in that way. And then greater connection between the parents and this provider. And they were able to come up with a plan that supported keeping the child in that child care setting. When I think about different teacher stories too, there was one in which a director was ready to let a child care provider go because this teacher or care provider was being dismissive and disruptive after a demotion related to kind of a change and rules in the education requirement. So my understanding was that the teacher had a different level of involvement in the classroom and had to be demoted just because of the changes in the rules in education. And the mental health consultant was called to support this center and think together again with the director about what it might feel like for this individual to be demoted in that way, even though it wasn't, necessarily the director's choice. And so they were able to think about things together and talk with that particular provider and the teacher, and were able to remedy things in that instance. I recently experienced another situation too, in which a child care provider was just planning to leave for a new and great job opportunity. And in this instance, we thought about just what it's like to say goodbye and how many of the children in that particular center had some histories of trauma, and having someone leave abruptly might, kind of trigger their feelings of abrupt loss. So we talked about how could we make this ending with this teacher a new type of ending, which we often do around, changes in classrooms or the end of the year. And the staff too were all able to discuss what this child care provider meant to them too, and how this individual knew about their own family stories and greeted them every day. And they decided to pass on some of the rituals that that child care provider who was leaving engaged in, almost daily. And it was just lovely. And they made a plan to say goodbye to the children in healthy ways to give them that healthy opportunity. So I'm going to just pause for a second and see if there's any questions so far.
Hey, Teya, thanks for pausing. Yeah, this has been really great. This is Nikki Lepowski speaking. There's a couple of questions that I just want to make sure we get to. Okay. Going back to the services being provided, there's a question about, oops, hold on one second, I just lost it. Do you have people in rural Minnesota is the question. And also, do you look to partner with other organizations to help in the flow of mental health consultation? This individual says they just completed a great course last Saturday that Northwest Foundation offered. She said it was Wildwood Learning ran the course, and it was fantastic.
Great. I actually didn't know about that course. I would love to know more, but I'm going to move forward on my slides. Let me go back to this, but I'll just answer the question to where do we have consultants? So this is a map of all of the agencies too that we contract with, and at each agency there's probably 1 or 2 mental health consultants. So you can see most of the state is covered. There may be just a couple of counties where we don't have good coverage. And then, when you think about like the northeast corner, there may be 1 or 2 consultants in that area serving, that's such a big geographical area. So we will often have them do consultation, via virtually or video in that way. And we have 2 tribal nations represented, and I think that we're going to be contracting with another coming up too. So I can think a little bit more about that with you.
Great, thanks for sharing that. I think that visual and that map helps people to see where the consultants are. And then there was another question, well, there was 2 more I think we could do right now. When you were giving the stories about the child or the child stories, the question was, did you use strength-based assessment for the child?
So we have some assessment tools that we just use generally. And so one of them is called The Child, and it's developed by Yale. And we go into the classroom and we just get a look at like what do the interactions look like. But when we talk about child specific, there isn't a specific tool that we're using. Again, all of our mental health professionals are trained in early childhood mental health. And so what they're doing is using observation and interview to think about how the child is functioning. And our approach is always very strength-based too, and trauma-informed. And we think about educational or care disparities and differences in culture.
Great, thank you. We have one more question, and this comes from a leader that's on that says, is giving an example and looking for maybe an advice, and if you want to answer that now or hold till the end, either's good.
Why don't we hold for a little bit? Let me just get through some of this part, and then we can take kind of case related questions too.
Perfect, sounds good. I'll hold on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to think a little bit about the benefits of mental health consultation. This is, relatively newer research associated with mental health consultation, but there's research too that shows that mental health consultation improves child care staff retention and morale. And then we see a decrease in mental health symptoms in young children. So they did some randomized trials, and this is coming out of Yale, and it not only prevented mental health disorders in some young children, it also reduced mental health symptoms in young children demonstrating specifically more impulsive and hyperactive behaviors, so externalizing behaviors, not necessarily the internalizing behaviors, such as anxiety. Some of the research too that I think is really fantastic coming out of Arizona too, I think these are two studies, one out of Yale and one out of Arizona, is that there's a reduction in educational disparities experienced by children of color. So in Walter Gilliam's studies, we're showing that teachers do have a tendency, it's just part of implicit bias, to notice children of color, more than other children who may be engaging in similar behaviors. So we just know that there's that implicit bias. And what they found is with consultation over time, so in Arizona, they found at 6 months, all children benefited when they did their pre and post measurements, and they used portions of the DECA to look at this, and some other methods as well. But they found between the 6 month and year mark that there was significant improvement too seen in African American and Latino boys, so much that on those measurements that they had eliminated the achievement gap, which is just gives me chills too. And one of the things to say there is that this wasn't about intervention specifically for the child. So there was no therapist who came in and intervened at the child level in these instances. It was all providing consultation to the actual teachers or child care providers. And it was through their interactions with the child that we saw the change. So then there's also research that shows a reduction in the expulsion of children from childcare and early learning because the support staff feel held. And then we see an increase in early learning staff in their competence in trauma, adversity, and early childhood and family mental health conditions too. So through the trainings. And one of the things too, when we provide trainings, we do so in a very interactive manner, because we find that just by providing a training, let's say on trauma, doesn't make someone, trauma informed. It's the follow-up and the conversations about how it applies to the setting and how it applies to our own lives that makes it stick. This is just a quick slide on Minnesota, and this isn't necessarily research proven, but with just some calculations that one of my colleagues put together, Catherine Wright, and she just looked at how much we were spending on about 68 children who were involved in day treatment services and how much we were paying to serve those children on a yearly basis, and discovered that each of those children had a history of being expelled from childcare. And so this is just kind of extrapolating, right? If we had provided more supportive services in the childcare setting, could some of this have been prevented? So our mental health consultants, like I already mentioned, are all mental health therapists. Many of them are serving, exclusively early children in early childhood, and some serve an array, but they have very specific training in early childhood mental health, something called the Diagnostic and Classification System for Children 0 to 5. We also provide all sorts of training for them, and they are actively pursuing or have pursued endorsement in our system in infant mental health at level 3 and level 4. And we provide at least 100 hours initially for all of our consultants on this consultative model, on diversity-informed tenets, on adult learning. And we continue to address these. They receive at least 8 hours annually on reducing implicit bias. And then as one of our mottos in early childhood care, and there's a woman named Jeree Paul, who's one of the mothers of early childhood mental health, and she said, do unto others as you would have others do unto others. I think they call it the platinum rule. And so it's just this idea that if the consultants engage with the child care providers in healthy social and emotional ways, that will better support the child care provider in doing that with parents and children. And so we believe that everyone needs this type of supervision. And so our consultants receive supervision from their supervisors in this system. And then they also, our supervisors are supported by a national leader in early childhood mental health consultation. So I already showed you where the consultants work. And again, I think we talked about how we know it's working, and those involved in Parent Aware in our longer mental health consultation will be asked to engage in some of these pre and post measures. And we're not measuring the children as much as we're measuring the likelihood that a teacher may expel a child. We're looking at a burnout scale. We're having individuals take an implicit bias test. We're looking at that, we call it the climate of healthy interactions for learning and development, and all of these kind of pre and post. So this is where I'll pause for a second and then just take that question, Nikki, that was more specific.
Great, thanks. So the question was specific to an example. So it says a coworker at their childcare center has a student or a child that has been struggling with handling emotions. She had to move her child to a different childcare, but now is experiencing the same issues with the new place. Any advice for the mom, or what steps to follow?
Right. And so this is always our consultants will say it depends, because in typical mental health consultation, we would have some discussion about that person's experience. And is this person able to just be on to have kind of a little bit of an audio conversation so I could ask a couple of questions?
Sure, we can ask. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing their name right. Ratiba, are you available to come off of mute if possible? And I can do that for you so you could have a discussion with Teya. If so, you can type in the question box, yes, or I can go ahead and just unmute you if you're in a place that allows that.
And then Nikki, remind me, the behavior was the child was it clinging, or did I have that wrong?
Sure. It says that they're just struggling with handling emotions. She's available to talk, so I'm going to go ahead and take her off mute.
Okay.
You're self-muted, so if you can unmute yourself, Ratiba.
Yes, done. Hi, everybody. Yeah, hi. Yes, what I noticed about this child, that she's very smart, she's very social, she's doing very good. But when it comes to asking her to do something, or maybe asking her to share or give stuff to other kids, she always wants something for herself. So if things don't go the way she wants, she threw a tantrum. And we had even observer, they came and observed her, and they advised to go through Help Me Grow. Yeah, so I wanted the mom to talk to you directly if there is a number. If there is a number, the mom can talk to you directly, because I asked my friend if she's doing the Help Me Grow. She didn't feel like she's seeing the results.
Okay.
And especially with COVID-19 now, they don't go home, they don't go to her house.
Right. Yeah, and I would be happy to, after this, if you want to email me to talk about, potential referrals in your area. But one of the things I think it's interesting to think about is, does the child have trouble with, big reactions at home, or is it just in the childcare setting?
The mom said that she's fine at home.
She's fine at home. And yeah.
But in the other daycare, other daycare, what happened? She just took a marker and she colored on the face of the child, and then she called the child, and they just called the mom, and then they sent the police to her house. I don't know if they're suspecting something, or I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
I think she need help. The mom need help to talk about maybe again with the Help Me Grow or with your service.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this consultation would be a great service too for this child. And some of the things we talk about too with families are about what might be going on in the home, but also every child kind of learns about how to regulate their own emotions and behavior kind of at different speeds. And you know, we will help the care providers figure out some strategies too for maybe, you know, giving the child some other things to do, or maybe finding different ways that the child care provider can be close with the child. Sometimes we use stories too to help the child understand figuring out disappointment. And then we might even think about like different levels of mad too, you know, like when you stub your toe, that's a little mad. When someone takes a toy, that's a little mad. And we do this, we do, oh man, or we, you know, give them strategies to negotiate for a toy, and that we save big mad for really big moments. But in our mental health consultation too, we do feel like adults are there to help kids regulate. So we would teach some ways too that the adults can help the child manage the big emotion, because it sounds like she's having a hard time managing it on her own. But again, this sounds like a really great case for some consultation. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, and thanks, Teya, for the response. There's one more question, and it kind of leads into what you just said about, you know, supporting the adults that are there with the child. And this probably plays in a lot with what's happening currently with the pandemic too. The question or the ask is, can you just talk about about the research that's been performed between the parent-child relationship, specifically the parent, child, and provider relationship, and how that's taken into consideration with mental health consultation and the work that you guys do?
Yeah, and we do feel like the parent and child and staff connection are just essential. And I provided consultation at one site where we really thought about how important that is, right? And how important the child care provider is in supporting the relationship between parent and child, but also how the parent can support how it's going between the care provider and the child. And so we do know there's lots of research, right, that talks about attachment and how a child needs a safe and consistent relationship and supportive relationship with an adult to manage. And so we do find instances, like I remember consulting at one site a long time ago where the child didn't appear to be having a healthy relationship, even in infancy, with the caregiver, wasn't cueing, you know, really well. The child was about 6 months old, wasn't looking to parents in the same way. And through really, really consistent daily care from the child care staff, we saw the child start to light up, and we had the child care providers highlight that when the parents would come to pick up the child. Oh my gosh, look at how this baby looks at you. And then you saw the parent light up and want to try more with the baby. And then we saw just the significant improvement in interaction. So it is hard to do, you know, work with children without parents. And you know, we can do a lot of great work in the child care setting. And if we don't have parents on board who are supporting it in some way, you know, after hours, then, you know, it's harder to achieve significant change too. So we do, it's essential. We talk about our client really being the relationship, you know, between staff and children and parents and children, parents and staff. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I would agree that's super important.
Thank you. Yep, that's all the questions we have right now.
Okay. So I just wanted to think together, and this is where I hope you guys will write in the chat if you can. What are some challenges staff and children are experiencing where you think it's really related to the pandemic, the COVID? So could people just type in a few things quickly and let me know?
And for those of you that are typing in the question chat dialog box, this is Nikki. I'll go ahead and I'll respond and make sure that Teya, I'll field those responses. So okay. Again, yeah, so if anyone wants to go ahead and just keep typing in, that would be great.
And I don't know if I'll see those or not. Do you know?
I don't know if you see those. I do have you marked down as a presenter, so I think you can see them under your questions dashboard, but if not, I'll try to synthesize them.
And has anyone written anything in? Because I can also talk about general themes too.
Yep, I have a few right here. So it looks like as far as challenges right now, one which is very present is the fear of not cleaning enough.
Yeah.
And then also, it looks like there's some older school-age children that are afraid to come back to the program for the summer because they're really afraid. They're stating they haven't really seen that with many of the younger children, maybe because of developmentally or comprehension, but with the older children, they're seeing that.
Yeah, you were saying they're feeling afraid to come back?
Correct.
Yeah, and I think that those are really important themes too, like thinking about what does it feel like for the childcare provider too, to think about like, have I cleaned enough? Is there more that I can do? And we'll think about that too, because I'm sure it is super anxiety provoking to think about that. And I've worked a lot with parents who've had children with chronic medical conditions, and that's always been a theme that they've experienced too. Like, how much do you worry about that, and how much do you just kind of do what you need to do, and then just to have some trust too that it will be enough. And then thinking about older kids too. So let me just think about just challenges that I'm hearing too, differences in behavior. So some childcare providers say that, you know, they've been able to maintain a regular routine and it's not super stressful at home and they're not seeing significant changes. But I have had some childcare providers talk about withdrawal from some kids, or maybe some of this happened more initially, you know, or you might be seeing it now because kids are coming back. Maybe some increases in aggression. And when I talk about hypervigilance, this is just that feeling like of, you know, like feeling like you need to always be on alert. We might see new themes in play. So the other day I was listening to someone who does therapy, and they said that these children were playing, I have COVID, and then they would fall down and die. And another one where they were playing nurses, and you heard the word COVID come up. I have a friend of mine, and her little 5-year-old the other day got angry, and he said to his mom, "You're such a COVID." So we see new themes in play, and play I think about is similar to adults and you guys are all early childhood, you know, providers, so you know this stuff, but just we talk things out as adults, and children's language is play. So we'll be seeing themes. Maybe it could be, you know, in hurriedness of parents. You might see some kids in changes or lacking joy. Certainly, I'm sure you're going to see kids seeming clingy. So especially if they spent a lot of time home with parents, or they're worried about parents in some way. You might see differences in sleeping, or, you know, pooping or eating, and then definitely some regression in previously acquired skills. So you might have kids who were once potty trained who aren't, you know, now potty trained. Did anyone have anything to add? Nikki, was there any additions that I didn't cover?
Most of them you covered. I think one that was mentioned about the idea that the children that have been attending the whole time thinking that their friends are never coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that. And then also just the mention of, you know, the educators and the teachers wearing masks.
Yeah.
Some children not comfortable with it, and or the parents having some about what that looks like when they're being cared for with masks.
And one of the things, I should have put a slide in here, but just really thinking about the developmental level of children. So you have that, like, that separation anxiety phase, right? That happens anywhere from 8 months till 24 months. And so you think about in this phase, when kids naturally have this worry that people don't come back, and they've had some circumstances where all of a sudden they didn't come back to their teachers, or they have a peer who didn't come back. We see different themes too in a child's ability to understand, or their different developmental levels in their ability to understand people coming and going. And so this is where, as we think about strategies, I will in a little bit, we think about really providing kids an important narrative around that, because in their minds, right, it's reinforcing that something that their body is already thinking about. Another common theme is body issues, right? Like sometimes kids worry, you know, when they're young in that preschool age that something bad is going to happen to their body, or they're going to lose, you know, some sort of body part. And so if they're hearing things on the news about people not being able to breathe, or some of these things happening to people, it certainly can feed on just the typical anxiety that would always be there just because of where they are at in development. So when you think about what lies underneath the behavior, you know, this confusion about routine having changed. I added here too, what are these masks? You know, again, some little kids can't, you know, if a parent shaves off a beard, it doesn't feel like the same parent, or if they take off their hats. And so now we have these masks changing what our features already, you know, look like. This maybe wonder in how things have changed. Why do I have to wash my hands? Or why are people being so anxious when I touch things now? Like there's new rules, a different way that we are in the world that is really confusing. Maybe this idea of why can't my grandparents hug me, or people like that, or why do people back up when I go to reach for them with my arms, and how confusing this is. And then worry associated with that confusion too. You know, what is COVID? You know, why are my people so worried? And there's a lot of research that talks about a child's ability to do better in crisis is dependent on how the adults around them are coping. You know, so if you have an adult who's really dysregulated, it's hard for a child to find their own compass to use that caregiver. So we're really, this is why we added this brief consultation, because we really want to support those of you who are supporting children, because that's important to us. So what's really important is to provide a narrative around what's happening. How do we explain COVID-19 to children? And I would love if someone wants to add in the chat box how they're describing it. The word sick is hard. I've had some people talk about people who've died as being sick. And there's different types of sick. So I might, you know, for some kids provide a little bit more information about how this sick, you know, doesn't often make a lot of kids sick, but, you know, other big people have gotten more sick from this and they need more care and attention. There's lots of books out right now that people are just developing right now to help kids think about what COVID is. I'm just curious, Nikki, did anyone respond to that? How are they describing COVID to little kids?
Haven't gotten any responses. If I do, I'll certainly chime in though.
Okay, because there's lots of different words that we can use, and if you want me to think more about that, I can. And then really providing kids opportunities to play about what's happening. So you might have, you know, maybe some doctor equipment if you know that that's something that's happening, you know, in their lives. You know, it might be grocery store things because there's been, you know, some scarcity of resources. And then I would just urge you, which I'm sure you've heard from multiple sites, to try and maintain some sort of familiar routine, because it's in that predictability that makes other things okay. Providing reassurance and then co-regulation. And I would just have you think to yourselves about what you need during this time. And remember that the children are people too. And if you can imagine, maybe you're craving hugs because you can't have them right now, or maybe that's not the policy, but how can we be, you know, close and in relationship with children in these ways? I was just reading on the 0 to 3 website. It was geared toward parents, but there's a link here about how to transition children back after sheltering in place and how that might feel to children. So the person talking about, you know, friends not coming back, or just kids kind of, you know, they've maybe enjoyed time with their parents, or maybe they worry if they're not around their parents, then, you know, parents will die or they'll get COVID. I think that these are all just very legitimate concerns for kids, and something that we just can't dismiss. We can't just say, oh, no, you're okay. You know, we have to help them by providing them an age-appropriate story, and then regulation on top of that. So when I think about family themes too, just general increased stress, you might have uncertainty related to employment, parents now juggling work and parenting, so they're having to, work from home and trying to parent at the same time, or maybe they have just differences in schedules because they're on the front line. I think about scarcity of resources. Thankfully, at least in my area, there's been more toilet paper, but I know other people, especially in the cities, may be struggling with like getting into stores to waiting. I know that there's been, lack of resources when it comes to wipes, and some people were even talking about formula, or it might be hand sanitizer. All of these things, I think, create a different level of anxiety for us. And we should recognize too that some of these themes might be themes that families have struggled with historically. They may be families where there have been scarcity of resources. And so this might amplify a family's anxiety. And sometimes we find families who are like, this is nothing. This is something that I do daily, so it doesn't feel any different. So in childcare providers too, and I know you could help me in this area, thinking about how do you manage your own life stress on top of the stress of these children and families. We can't separate it. Sometimes there's instances where we're able to separate our own troubles, from the children we work with, but right now we're experiencing some of the same things. And how do I balance the need to do my job and the ever-changing information related to COVID? Like the other day, I heard that maybe COVID isn't transmitted quite as much, through contact with objects. So I think that that's confusing. Will I contract COVID while I'm working, right? I'm sure some of you are super worried about that. Or will that then impact my family because I'm opening up my home to all of these families who are moving about the world and exposed to germs. And then I talked about the scarcity of resources as well. And then depending on your own history as a provider too, this might amplify your worry to different levels. If you are someone who's experienced some trauma in your life, the fact that we have to be on alert all the time might bring up more of that worry for you, or again, worry about getting what you need. I had someone the other day talking about how they noticed that they were pulling more off the shelf at the grocery store, and they remembered a time in their life where their family didn't have enough food. And so she thinks that her worry felt maybe bigger than maybe a friend who hadn't experienced that same thing. So I put on this picture too about the oxygen mask too, that we always need to remember to put on our mask before assisting those around us. Because if you aren't healthy and well, right, then it's hard to be present for children. And I know sometimes, even if we are full of anxiety, we just do have to continue to, take care of children. Or I would even consider, thinking about, if a break is possible. So I wanted to think too, I'm going to just answer, I know we only have about 7 minutes left, but I want to think about these questions with you, but answer to some kids are not comfortable seeing the staff wearing masks. I might, if you could send out some sort of notice to parents, but having mask play at home a little bit, like having a parent put on a mask and then take off the mask, or maybe even playing some games like, do you think I'm happy or do you think I'm sad underneath, or playing some fun imitation games with the eyes, just helping kids get comfortable. I had someone who will be transporting some kids coming up soon, and they were going to require the kids to wear masks in the transport van. And so the parents were talking about, as they ride in the car, they're practicing wearing masks so that the children will understand. I have another teacher who's sending out pictures of themselves to all of the kids with a mask and without a mask, so that they can see when they come back what the teacher is going to look like in advance. And then just thinking about, how are we describing COVID to a child? Again, it will depend on the age. So I would also think about, what is this child's experience? Like, I was here and then I went away. You know, there's just something called, it's a really big sick called COVID. And this really big sick made you have to stay at home so that your family could be healthy and so we could clean things here and get ready for you to come back so that we can be together in a safe way. You know, but sometimes I might have to tell you to put your hands on your side or not to put your hands in your mouth, or I might say you have to wear a mask, and it's just to keep you safe. And then if there have been people who have been ill, then we talk about that too. You know, that many people who have COVID will get better after they have special medicines and special care. And some people will have a really hard time, you know, but we want to reassure them. But, you know, you will always have people who will care for you. You know, that I am always like, I feed you healthy food, and we, you know, and you get plenty of rest to keep your body healthy. So some of those things.
Hey, Teya.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know we're close on time, but in response to your question about how we're speaking about COVID, there were a couple shares that I just want to repeat to you, to the whole group, so that they can hear them. But just discussing social stories are sometimes have been brought up as a helpful way to talk about it. And also, someone shared that they saw a teacher who did something about wearing glasses so that they can see, wearing a raincoat so they don't get wet, wearing a mask so we're not cold, and then making the reference of we're wearing a mask so we can stay safe. So giving the why behind it, or the connection.
That's lovely. Those are lovely examples too. Yeah, and there are a lot of social stories I hear on the web about it. So, you know, we don't have to create our own. There's a lot of help. I think people are thinking about this. So just in kind of like closing too, just a couple questions that I'm hoping people will shoot out some answers. When this was all first started, I was just thinking to myself about when has there been a time when I completely forgot about COVID and my life just felt kind of regular. And that we need to think about, like, how can we have some time where we can allow our brains to relax. But I guess I was just wondering if a couple of you could just shout out some examples or type them in the, the chat about times where they were doing something. What were you doing when you completely forgot about COVID?
There's some answers coming in.
Yeah.
Or responses coming in, I guess. One early learning leader said, when the children and I are outside in my garden, in the play area.
Yes.
And also awakening their natural resources of life skills.
Yes.
Children life skills like sewing, cleaning up.
Yes.
Things.
Yeah. I think that those are great. And I just, like, to me, spring came, you know, like COVID didn't stop spring, and kids continue to develop. COVID didn't stop that. And so these are things, I think, especially if you're a director and you're supporting staff, that we need to be in touch with those things as much as we can. And then the other thing too is I know that there's been a lot of adversity and a lot of loss for people and sad things, but I also think that there are some unexpected positive things. And maybe that other one was a response to that too, just like reconnecting with some of these, things that kids maybe used to be taught and maybe we didn't have time for them, or things that have different usefulness now. But what is something that's unexpected and maybe positive that has come out of this period of quarantine or this different way of living for a while?
Someone alluded to the fact of, the simplicity of things, and more connection with their own children. Also the response of just the simplicity of washing their dishes at home and leaving their house after a weekend and then remembering what that's like. Spending the time in the present moment of playing games with their family or playing games with their children. So just some examples of that. And then just really the priceless moments of connecting.
Definitely. And so the connecting moments, and two, I've heard a lot of people just talking about just noticing things that are happening in nature, right? So keep thinking about those things. I think it's so important to glean something out of this. And I've added too at the end here some resources. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network is fantastic. And there's kind of a mentor of mine, Chandra Goshipan, who's created this Trinka and Sam. And this one is fighting the big virus. And she actually has pages that you can print out for the kids. They might even be little finger puppets, things like that. And she has them for all sorts of natural disasters. So when there was a tornado that came through here a while back, we talked about the big wind and used these. And the Minnesota Children's Cabinet also has created a bunch of resources, and I know childcare has them a bunch too, so just check those out. And then this is my contact information, so feel free to contact me if you just want to chat about anything I've said today. I'm not in on Fridays usually. I'm doing my other consultation on that day of the week, and I don't work for the state. You know, Monday through Thursday, I'm available and would just love to connect and think about how child care mental health consultation might work well for you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Teya. This has been everything that we expected and more. So really appreciate the time and the pivoting to connect with what's going on in the world right now. I just want to note that there are a lot of questions about getting copies of the slides and the recording. Yes. And yes, Teya will send us the presentation after today, and that includes the links. And we'll also be sending out a follow-up email that includes the recording of this webinar too, so you can get all the questions and pieces of that together, along with any other resources that Teya wants to send our way. We'll watch for an email that will be coming out within the next 3 to 5 days.
Yeah. And I just want to thank you for all you do. You're so important in the lives of so many children, and I just appreciate that. So please be well.
Awesome. Great. Christy, anything else? Otherwise, I think we're good here.
Oh, I had trouble. No, we're good. Thank you so much, Teya.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.